Okay. Alright, so if you're watching this video, make sure you've done all the stuff in the intro content, because that's also due at the end of the first week. I can't reiterate that enough. Obviously, last semester, when I taught this class, a couple people missed that. I'm trying to make sure nobody misses that this semester. So, after you have done all the content in the intro content section, come down here. This video is no longer there. It's replaced by the video you're currently watching. And basically, here's the discussion forum instructions. It's the same thing as the intro, the student introductory forum. Basically, I'm going to pose a question to you, not every week, but every couple of weeks. And your job is to come in there, of course, read the question, because you'll have to read it to answer it. But then answer it in so many words. I'll tell you each week how many words I expect, and then also reply to someone else with how well reply to it in so many words, because it differs by week what you'll reply with. So these instructions are here if you want to read them, kind of that visual and auditory, and now the reading instructions. And now for the you can read those instructions if you want to, but then also go to week 1 discussion forum, and that's where the assignment takes place for this week. And so what we're doing here is I want you guys to take this. It's kind of what I call a preliminary Myers-Briggs, because it's kind of a summarized version. And if you're not familiar with the Myers-Briggs, what it is it helps people determine their own personality traits, and so it kind of gives you a definite this is what kind of person I am, and it kind of helps you to identify with yourself and figure out what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are as far as as far as personality goes, but inadvertently that translates into leadership very well. And so you can kind of look and see, as far as leadership goes, where are your strengths now, where are your weaknesses. And so once you've done that, by clicking on this link and then taking it, it'll take you to this website here. Maybe. There we go. Computer's a little slow today, but it will load up, I promise. There we go. So it's basically, they call this a Likert scale. Well, most people call it a Likert scale. It's actually pronounced Likert, but that's because the guy that made it, his last name was Likert. But anyways, it's anytime there's a scale from 1 to 5. In this case, 1 is a yes and 5 is a no. That's typically backwards. But anyways, you're almost never late to your appointments. Yes or no. If you're uncertain, this is like a strong yes, somewhat yes. You don't know, a somewhat no, and then a strong hard no. And so you go through and answer these. It's going to assign you one of these 16 personality traits, and then you'll be able to click on it and it'll tell you all about yourself, which is kind of interesting. Not necessarily because it's like a what do they call that when you have like the Capricorn stuff? I'm Capricorn. That's the only reason I know that one. Man, I can't think of the word. But anyways, that type of stuff is kind of the same idea, but this one's a little bit more research-based. I don't know how research-based the other stuff is, but this is research-based. I think it was created by Carl Jung in a long time ago. And it tells you a lot about, so for instance, here's the ESTJ, thrive on order and continuity, being extroverted. If you come down here, service, the tangible expression of responsibility is another key focus of this person. They love to provide, they receive good service, have an acute sense for orthodoxy, promote work ethic, power, position, and prestige to be worked for and earned. And so it tells you kind of what kind of person you are, and so it tells you a lot about your personality. Outspoken, a person of principles, and of course, if you find that this is opposite from what you think about yourself, that's something to think about. Why do you see yourself one way, but your answers reflected another? So anyways, once you complete that, spend some time analyzing your results. Reflect on the areas of your life where these preferences appear, but also check the self-development and the business use sections after you receive the results. Do you think they're accurate? We talked about that. These are just some thinking questions. These aren't necessarily questions you have to answer. These are just questions to get you thinking. Does more than one type apply to you? Do you see them as strengths or weaknesses? What learning style does this suggest? Is there a time when you remember some of these preferences stand out in your memory as, with specific examples? And then think about how these preferences, if they're accurate, have affected your life in the past or how they're currently affecting your life. Now again, those aren't the questions you answer. That's just something to get you thinking. The questions you answer are down here. So, in at least 250 words, discuss your results with your classmates. Begin by explaining the type, your type, one of the 16, and how it reflects your strengths and weaknesses. Talk about what you perceive as your strength and what you perceive as your weakness. A lot of people, if they look at like the last one we just looked at, ESTJ, talks. It was kind of a more outgoing person, extroverted, sensing, thinking, and judging. And so some people might consider judging to be kind of a downfall, or even maybe introverted or extroverted. They might think that that's a weakness for them in some categories. Others might think it's a strength. What do you think? And so discuss your learning styles and talk about how some of the careers that were suggested for you. Talk about how you view yourself with regard to the leadership role, and if you have an approach to leadership. So what is your current approach to leadership, and does it kind of correspond with whatever personality you've got? So like I said, answer these questions in 250 words at least. And then once you're done, spend some time looking at your peers. So at least one person, reply to at least one peer in 100 words, and consider how they feel, or excuse me, how you feel they fit with other types. So if you're an ESTJ, how does an INTJ? How do you think you two would interact? How do you think that person, you might even ask them a question, how do you interact with someone that's like that? Or if you find someone that's a similar personality category to you, you might ask them how you deal, or how they, deal with someone you're having trouble with at work. Maybe they've discovered something else because they're a similar personality trait to you. What type of role do you think this peer might be best suited for? So talk about those types of things. I give you some examples in at least 100 words. So that's an example of the discussion forums we're going to have each week. Like I said, I try and make them a little bit more thought-provoking than just, what's your favorite color? So for here, make sure you do that. And then once you're finished, spend some time completing your reading assignment for this. I make this an assignment. You can't actually do anything with it. You can click on it, but it doesn't. It actually just says, it explains the reading. It doesn't. There is no assignment attached to this reading, so don't try to submit anything in this block because there's nothing here. This is just for an explanation. The reason I make it look like an assignment is to catch your attention. If everybody looks like it's an assignment, then they'll do it. One thing I do in this class is to make all the assignments apparent so that you can, because there's a lot of stuff to look at on this week. If you see something that ends an assignment, those are the things you have to do for the week. Okay, so you can see this week there's only 3 things that are due for a grade. So make sure, if you do nothing else, make sure you do this, make sure you do these 2 assignments, and you'll at least get your grade. Here's my week 1 lecture. I'm not going to re-record my lectures. I'm just going to re-record my intro videos for a couple of the weeks because I did change some things in the first couple weeks of the class. So even if you're in winter 2018, some of the dates might be screwed up. But if that's the case, don't pay attention to the date. Just go by the dates that are on these modules. So whatever dates on your module here, on this module, or on the assignments themselves, make sure you follow those dates. Nothing you see in the video because the dates just might be wrong. So watch that lecture. I'm going to basically give a brief overview of a bunch of theories, and after you finish reading it, now you can start working on begin working on the last 2 elements, the analysis discussion and the downfall. These 2 are really kind of interesting, so click on this one. These are kind of your first instance of trying to apply some theory to real-world scenarios. So one of the keys to elements of becoming an expert in the field of psychology is to learn to interpret data. And so this is kind of interesting because on page, 7, and paying particular attention to man's research on personality traits and their ability to predict leadership qualities. Then the table is actually on page 9. So I want you to look at this table and look at the correlation on each of the personality traits that he measured and analyzed. And he notes a weak correlation is indicated by an R value less than 0.30. It gets kind of technical, but basically just know that if it's less than 0.30, that there's not much of a correlation there. That's R values basically are how we calculate the level of a correlation. So we were looking at how attendance rates correlated to success in the class. Did you know that if you miss the first day of a class, you only have a 20% likelihood that you'll complete that class successfully? So that's a correlation that I've actually found in my research. So strong correlations are indicated by an R value of 0.50, and the data on these tables, you can see, if you pull up page 9, here we go. Looks like this. Whoop. If you look at page 9, you can see intelligence has a 0.25 R value, so there's a 0.25 level of correlation. That's still, it's the highest one, but it's still lower than 0.30. And so I want you to think about what that means. Basically, they're saying one of two things is that, first of all, out of all these items, intelligence is the most reflective. Even though it's weak, very weak, it's still somewhat reflective. However, it's not that reflective. So the fact that none of these necessarily predict or correlate to a leader, what does that mean to you? So breaking it down here, these are the data that I urge you to analyze on your own. You dive in this field of psychology, finding sources, whatnot. These values will help you to understand what the research is really saying. So when you start doing research on your own for your research paper, you're going to run into data like these. And data is actually a plural word. That's why I keep saying these data, because it's like saying these cats or these dogs. These data, because data is plural. Datum is actually the singular. And you'll be able to use these these data. As I say that, I caught myself in a grammar error. Use these data to prove your own perspective or intent for future research. So you can actually use these to say, if you're looking at that intelligence, you might say something like, even though intelligence has a weak correlation, it's the highest correlated out of all of these other ones. And you could use that to make a point. For this assignment, I want you to reflect on these data and tell me what they mean. Even though Mann and the authors of our textbook note that these correlations are weak, what else can you draw from this information? What does it mean that you can, out of all these variables, intelligence is showed to have the highest correlation? What does that mean to you? Does it mean anything to you that intelligence is only 0.05 short of being a moderate correlation? So weak correlations are still correlations, but moderate means that there's probably a relationship there. Weak correlations mean maybe. What does it mean that dominance showed the second highest correlation? Is that something that you considered being important in a leadership role, dominance? What about sensitivity and masculinity being the lowest correlates? Reread this part of the section that notes, here's a quote from page 44, because we are reading these sections. A person can have too much of a seemingly good thing. In the case of intelligence, Stockdale therefore observed that the leader is likely to be more intelligent, but not too much more intelligent. And he kind of goes on to explain how that could work. And he actually talks about, I don't remember if it's in this chapter or not, but he talks about how our previous George Bush, not senior, but junior, how this played into him. I don't want to spoil it, but read that section, because that's actually, that's on your midterm. That section about George Bush. So think about how intelligence played a role in George Bush's scenario whenever he was president. The pattern of personal characteristics must bear some relevant relationship to the characteristics, activities, and goals of the followers. Now that is kind of a very good principle to write down, because not only do I think it's on the midterm, but it's also kind of the general synopsis of this book. That is what they are trying to teach in a nutshell throughout this entire book, is that the pattern of personal character must bear some relevant relationship, and we'll kind of touch back on that every week from this point forward. So your assignment is this. In 250 words, explain your observations of the data outlined on page 9. Those correlations. And considering Stockdale's discussion, explain how these data may or may not, you choose, reflect what Stockdale is suggesting. Be sure to provide an example to help your reader better understand your perspective. So basically, you're making the argument. You're not right or wrong either way. No matter what you write, realistically, you're not right or wrong. You either have a good argument or you have a bad argument. And so that's what I'm trying to kind of get you to wrap your head around. No matter what you think here, it's right. You're going to get credit for it. I'm not going to say no, you're wrong, but I will say you don't have enough evidence. You don't have enough examples to make me believe what you're saying is true. So that's, whenever you're writing this, that's, in your 250 words, which isn't very much, but you know, in the space, in the time you have, make a good argument that one explains your theory, your idea, your answer, but then provides evidence and examples on why I should believe you. That's what you're going to get graded on here. So let's go ahead and go back home. And in week 1, you will now have, that's the first assignment. That's the analyzing, what do we call it? The analysis discussion, a leader analysis. But then, go down to the downfall assignment. This one's a little bit more pop culture related. So basically you can read all this, but it boils down to this. Choose a leader from the list. And using one of these theories, write a 250-word response in which you explain the downfall of one leader and how it aligns with one of the theories. So here's an example. If you could blame the downfall of a leader to a lack of some element, which element would you ascribe to their downfall? Or ascribe their downfall to? In which theory does that element fall under? Which theory and corresponding lack of leadership quality explains why the leader eventually fell? Be sure to provide a citation for the sources you're using in researching your chosen leader. So you have a list of leaders here. And then below that you have a list of theories. And so what I want you to do is research these leaders. And again, you're not doing like a whole research paper in 250 words or more. So do a little research here on how these people fell. Now, we're talking about the people themselves, because I noticed that there's some in here that are more religious. And so I'm not looking at, this isn't to say that, you know, if you're Christian, Jesus Christ didn't fall necessarily, but I'm talking about, you know, what led to his death, or, well, you know, it's physical death. If you're a Christian, you fall, that stuff. What led to his physical death. And if we're talking about King Arthur, there's a good chance that guy didn't even exist. But if he did, according to the stories we know about him, what led to his physical death, or, you know, his death? Because technically in the stories he didn't die. He's just resting in Avalon until England needs him again. But then you can go into the really fictitious ones where we're talking about Robert Neville from I Am Legend. If you remember that movie, hopefully you remember the book. That's that's kind of what I'm talking about here. But if you remember the movie, I guess that works too. President Snow in the Hunger Games novel, Darth Vader from Star Wars. You know, any of these. And I haven't updated these, so I still have Negan, which isn't necessarily. I guess he's still an antagonist on the show. He's just kind of in jail. Well, I guess he's not anymore, is he? Walter White. If you watched Breaking Bad. Captain America. I don't know if I had him as an antagonist or a protagonist. Anyways, so choose one of these. Do the leadership. Research how this leader physically fell, if that applies to, you know, metaphysical or religious leaders. And then from here, choose a theory that applies. And like I said up here, excuse me, which theory and corresponding lack of leadership quality explain why this leader eventually fell. So think about that. And again, make your argument. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but I will tell you don't have enough evidence or enough examples to make me believe your answer is correct. So in 250 words, make me believe that lack of leadership quality, or that lack of element, or that theory is the reason that this person fell, whoever you choose. Now, did I give you a number of sources? I don't know if I have a number of sources. Like Mike Tyson all of a sudden. A number of sources. I don't think I have a number specified here, but I'll double check a little bit later when I get the assignment details. So let's see here. Anything else due this week? No, I don't think so. Okay, so just kind of a synopsis. You're watching this video. Read the discussion forum instructions, but I kind of went over them here. Do your week 1 discussion, answer the question, but then also one response to a peer. Do your reading, chapters 1 and 2. Watch the lecture that kind of goes over that reading, and then complete these 2 assignments. And if you have any questions, I have a weekly question forum where you can just post questions that everybody can see. Of course, you're also welcome to email, phone call, or text. I suggest texting because if I don't know your number, then I won't answer it. But if you do call me, make sure you leave a message, because I won't call you back unless you leave a message, because I'll just assume you're trying to sell me something. Alright, so that's week 1, and that's the intro content. So that's basically all we have due by the end of the first week. Like I said, I know it's a lot of a lot of stuff to do. But as the weeks taper off, we do less and less. So this is definitely a front-loaded course. You'll do most of the work in the first 4 to 5 weeks, and then there won't be a whole lot to do at the end because we'll just be, excuse me, focusing on your paper. So anyways, that's what we have now. And so if you have any questions, like I said, get in contact with me, and I am more than happy to work with you guys. And I will see you in week 2.